Subscribe below to Food and Wine's YouTube. Potato pancakes, or latkes, are a Hanukkah staple. We're starting with some Yukon Golds. Using a shredder is the easiest way to get this done. We're now going to squeeze all the moisture out of the potatoes. Moisture is the enemy of a delicious, well-fried latke. Onions are the other key, aside from potatoes, to a perfect latke. They add so much flavor. We're going to use 2 binders here, eggs and matzo meal. White pepper isn't going to affect the color, but is going to add a ton of flavor. You don't need to overwork this batter. You don't want to over-process these potatoes, just enough so that they form nice, even patties. The trick for frying is to get your oil hot enough. The thing about frying is if your oil is too cold, it'll actually result in greasier fried goods. So with hot enough oil, your latkes will be golden and crispy and not soggy and greasy. For delicious, tender, crispy latkes every time. Cioppino is a classic fish stew with a rich tomato-based broth with plenty of dry white wine to give it lots of flavor. We're starting the broth with plenty of aromatics, a whole shallot and 6 scarlet cloves, along with fresh basil, and then we're gonna add fresh cherry tomatoes and canned tomatoes a little later. This is gonna add 2 types of tomato flavor. Here we're adding a nice dry white wine. This is not only gonna bring some delicious fruity acid to the broth, but it's also gonna help scrape up the delicious brown bits on the bottom of the pan that we developed while cooking the garlic and shallots. We're now straining the tomato broth through a fine sieve to create a nice smooth broth. Be sure to season as you go. Adding salt here not only adds flavor, but it prevents you from over-salting at the very end. Sweet leeks and licoricey fennel, along with some celery leaves and oregano, form the foundational flavors that we're going to cook our seafood in. We're going to add it in stages so that nothing overcooks, but everything gets deliciously tender. As always, when you're cooking shellfish like clams and mussels, be sure to discard any that don't pop open after cooking. That means they weren't fresh and alive when they started cooking, and they're no good to eat. There's so many different kinds of seafood in this cioppino, so there's really something for everybody, but each different kind lends its own flavor. You get some nice salinity from the clams and mussels, a really sweet flavor from the shrimp, and a delicious, mild, clean, not fishy fish flavor from the snapper. Fresh herbs are always a nice way to finish, add a little brightness, and be sure to serve with plenty of toasted baguette. Here's Andrew Zimmern's refreshing take on a cold cucumber soup. We're going to use the blender here, and it's going to do all the work for us. We're combining some chopped cucumber, a little yogurt for tang and a body to the soup, plenty of shallots, garlic, dill, and parsley and tarragon, and plenty of olive oil. We're using a whole quarter cup here. So the 2 most important steps in this recipe: 1, blending it until it's all the way smooth, and 2, letting it sit overnight. This is really going to set up the texture, marry the flavors, and create a delicious, flavorful, full-bodied soup. This is a perfect summer soup to make ahead for your next barbecue or cookout. Duck à l'orange is actually quite simple to make at home, so it's not just reserved for a fancy night out at a restaurant. We're toasting the seeds to bring out their flavor. Toasting them in a dry pan instead of with oil lets you grind them in a spice grinder. We're gonna let the star anise and caraway seeds cool before we grind them, so there's not a buildup of steam and moisture in the grinder. Now we're just combining fresh orange juice with our toasted spices for a really simple marinade for the duck. Peking ducks have a ton of flavor and a ton of fat, so what we're doing here is pricking the skin with a fork, and this is going to do 2 things. 1, it's going to let the acidic toasted spice marinade really penetrate the meat and the skin of the ducks, but it will also help fat release later when we're cooking. By patting them dry after we've brushed the marinade off and then refrigerating them for 24 hours, you're really letting the skin dry out. That's what's going to create this beautiful lacquered skin. Now we're creating a really simple sauce with sugar and lemon juice. That sticky glaze that's classic in duck à l'orange. Plenty more fresh orange juice and Grand Marnier, an orange liqueur. That's gonna help round out the sauce. The alcohol is gonna cook down, really add brightness and depth to this orange sauce. And just at the end to finish off, we're adding shallot, orange zest, whole cloves, and a cinnamon stick. We're gonna strain this sauce, so we're really just infusing it with these flavors. You wanna serve this with plenty of rice to sop up the delicious sauce and the juicy meat. This creamy lemon pasta from Chef Andrew Zimmern takes advantage of the floral tender sweetness of Meyer lemons. It's important to use Meyer lemons here instead of standard grocery store lemons because they have a thinner, sweeter, less bitter zest. Here we're forming the bases of our sauce by cooking down plenty of zest and lots of sweet honey before we add the cream. Shallots are a little sweeter than yellow or white onions, so they add a really nice mild oniony bite here. Now we're just cooking our pasta in well-salted boiling water. We're using fettuccine here, but you could use any long-stranded pasta you like. Always reserve the cooking water when you're boiling pasta. It's full of delicious starch that will thicken up your sauces and help marry the noodles with the sauce. We're squirting the cooked noodles with a little bit of lemon juice to help keep them from sticking together and help them absorb the sauce. Finishing off with plenty of nutty, savory Parmesan cheese and a splash of that starchy pasta water. Finishing your pasta in the sauce is called marrying the pasta, and it infuses each noodle with flavor, so the sauce isn't just sitting on the noodles, but is really soaking into them. Serve this right away so the pasta sauce doesn't set up, and garnish with those juicy segments of Meyer lemon, plenty of cheese, and some sharp black pepper that will cut through the richness of the sauce. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Subscribe to Food & Wine's YouTube for more recipes.